Hi, it's Meryl Goldsmith, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this collaboration between Amesbury Community Television and the Amesbury Carriage Museum. This program is part of an annual series organized by the Carriage Museum focused on the theme of family stories. These programs bring attention to and support the sharing of local history. You can learn more about this and other programs by visiting amesburycarriagemuseum.com. Sign up to join us and become a member. We'd love to have you with us. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge our 2020 program sponsors, including Amesbury Industrial Supply and Greg T. Jardis, ARC Technologies, a Hexel company, and BB Alarm Systems. Now on to our conversation with Bob Grodzicki, a lifelong Amesbury resident who has photographed, painted, and studied our town for many decades. Hi, Bob. Hi, John
Hi.
Mayer, Executive Director of the Amesbury Carriage Museum.
Thank you, Meryl. Nice to be here.
How
Hello.
wonderful to have us live on Amesbury Community Television. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
We, we have so much to share this hour, so I really think that we should get to it. So many questions, so many images to allow people to know a little bit more about you and Amesbury. Bob, your documentation of Amesbury's history is really terrific. So I think what we'd want to do first is to take a few minutes, Bob, and tell us about growing up in Amesbury. What can you share about your family home and your time in Amesbury schools?
Well, I wasn't a very good student in going to school. I went to a Catholic school, and they're very strict, as you know. And so my best subject, of course, was art and penmanship and history. But I got through school just about passing, and a lot of times you couldn't do what you wanted to do, so uh, I had to make my own way in life. So uh, around the house, of course, I didn't have too many playmates. My sister was older, and my cousin was older, and they were off, you know, doing other things. So I would just be going around the neighborhood there, just um, taking in the sights, and I knew most of my neighbors. And I used to go home next door, uh, have a little lunch break sometimes with the neighbors here. I remember, of course, they were Polish people, so we were Polish. So they used to give me a big slice of Polish bread, with the butter on it. So I was kind of chubby then.
I
But
can't imagine that, Bob.
well, I looked at my old pictures, years ago. I says, "Yeah, that chubby little kid, that was me." And
Oh, that's terrific. So you were close with your neighbors, and you had to really make your own fun. So I think at this point, a lot of people can kind of relate, Bob, that, maybe the classic sort of school structure isn't for everyone. And so you went to the Haverhill Trade School in the early 60s. And what do you remember about beginning your work as a painter? Because that's what you did right after school.
yeah. Well, that was quite an eye opener going to trade school. I remember the first day. I couldn't believe it. Everybody was running around and talking, and I couldn't do that one. In grammar school, you'd get hit on the on your wrist or something. And so trade school, first, uh, well, my homeroom teacher, his father was a contractor, painting contractor. So he asked me, it was the summertime, would be out of school. He said, "You want to go to work for my father?" I said, "Sure, I'll go there." Because I had to replace somebody that got hurt on the job. But they're very busy in summertime, painting houses and everything. So I started painting for him in my first year of trade school. Of course, I was so young then that I had to have a work permit, and I was restricted. I couldn't get up on stage and know the ladders or anything. So you might as well say I started at the bottom of the pile there.
Yeah.
But
Literally, right?
Oh yeah, I was the lightest guy on the crew. Everybody else was like up to 190, 200 pounds. So I used to get all the high work, and I didn't mind. It'd be up on a 44-foot ladder. And,
Wow.
the heaviest guy in the crew would be sitting on the bottom of it, holding it steady for you. But that was, it didn't bother me at all, the heights. And then I did some carpenter work for him because, of course, my dad was a builder, and I learned a lot of carpentry from him.
Well, I understand that the house that you live in is the house that your dad actually built.
Yes, he did. Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure of the date. I know the house next to it, first, was built in 1925, and I'm thinking it must have been 1926 or 28 that our house was built. Because my dad, I think he told me when he was 18 years old, he built our house. So, I don't know. He was at Wentworth. He had 1 year at Wentworth Institute in Boston. So I was thinking that he must have gone there first before he started building. Because how would you know all the different things you had to learn to build a house from scratch? Because everything, there's no power tools or anything. You had to do it by hand. Well-built house. Never had any trouble.
Well, it's still standing, so it was a really well-built house, right?
Still work, still hard and no cracks in it. Yeah. So he built those houses, and I don't know when he built the shop in the back. It must have been before they started building houses. So my dad had a crew building houses at that time before I was born.
So, Bob, I want to ask you about your Aunt Mary. And she was really a big supporter in getting you started in not house painting, but painting and photography. And, what were some of your early paintings and your photographs? Can you share with us?
Well, the first painting I did was of our house. And it's kind of crude. There's a picture of it here someplace. And I started, I think it was in 58, something around there. And then we went out. She knew I was starting to, because my aunt was a painter long before me. And so we went out on location and did a couple of scenes in Amesbury. The first one I remember was the Ideal Laundry building there in the Lake Gardner Dam. And I think we set up on High Street Bridge there. That's when they, I think they took a photograph for the newspaper with me and my aunt painting away. But we always went on a location. And then when I graduated from grammar school, my aunt gave me lessons with Aida Tedford. She was a sort of famous around Boston, I guess. And she had a lesson, and we had to meet at the Bailey. It was called the Bailey Art Class because it was in the Bailey building, which is the former Merrimack Hat Company building on Merrimack Street. So we met there, I think, once a week. I don't remember how many lessons I had, but she taught me, know how to do all the shadowing and everything like that. And I still have the first painting that I did there, and that was a still life. I still have it. So. Then from there,
That's just wonderful. We're actually, getting to look at that right now. And,
first painting.
what I love, yeah, what I love, Bob, is that you love kitty cats. John told me that you love cats. You seem to include creatures in all of your paintings, and I think that is so special.
Because my family, both my parents grew up on farms, so they had cats and animals and cows and pigs, and chickens and ducks. So any stray cat that ever showed up at our house, they got fed and taken care of.
And they probably helped you take care of the stuff that was happening around the farm, right? So it was a win-win.
Yeah. Always we used to bring mice, and because my mother was very scared of snakes, and one of my cats would always bring a snake home, place it on the front steps, and my mother would go out the door. I'd be screaming. I said, "No, Tim, bring it back where you found it."
That's such a great memory. We are live here with Bob Grodzicki, and he is, a local historian, and he has spent his lifetime really documenting Amesbury, both his history and the history of Amesbury. And we're live on Facebook on channels 12 and 18 and online as well. And if you would like to ask Bob a question, you can do that on our Facebook page. Patrick is there helping out, and they'll get me the questions, and then I'll read the questions to you, Bob. Speaking about questions, I do want to ask you, you do a lot of painting, but one thing that I'm just astounded at, your ability to do wonderful models. You've done them of your family home, you've done them of the Salisbury Point Rail Station and the Amesbury Depot, which is now Crave. So how did you get interested in making models?
Well, my dad, of course, was running the mill, and there was plenty of scrap lumber. So I started, playing around with it, and I said, "Geez, I think I want to make a model of the house." So that was the first one I made. It was kind of crude. And then I said, "Well, how about the rest of the buildings that are here?" And so I learned from the first one, and I got better at it. These were all solid blocks of basswood, which is very easy to carve. So these are all carved in one solid block. At 3/32 to a foot, I made them to scale. So that's why they're so small there. So every 3/32 that made a foot in length. So I did those, and then I get started with other models, and I was building boats and bird houses and anything that was scrap lumber. I said, "Oh, I can make something out of that." Even though
So Bob, what I'm amazed at is, you're like, I didn't do well in school, but yet, you have such precision with these models and your drawings of the models. I've actually seen those at the Amesbury Carriage Museum, and you must have done, did you do a lot of research about this? How did you discover that you really had a knack for doing these models?
Well, I spent a lot of time at the Amesbury Library. Anything that interests me, I could get books for it. And I like to go to the stacks in the back and just spend hours so there and pick out the books that I wanted and just read all about it. And that's how I got an idea for some of the boats that I made. They were all to scale. And, I knew where to put the running lights and everything else on them. But that's how I started with that. And, as far as the Amesbury Depot, I did a lot of research. The Sanborn fire insurance maps. The railroad, I guess for the insurance they had to have everything measured, and they made a detailed list of all the materials everything was made out of and the size of everything. So that helped me a lot. So it took me about a long time to get the drawings made so I could, figure out how to make things, make the brackets and everything. So that's how I started with that. It takes a lot
Do you
of,
remember how long it took you to do like the depot? Do you remember, any sense of time?
I figured about 200 hours between research and then making it, painting it, make sure everything was right.
Wow. So Bonnie Brady is on Facebook, and I'm going to turn to look at the Facebook questions. So sorry, I'm not like focused on you, but Bonnie Brady wants to know, Bob, did you ever leave Amesbury for any period of time?
Like how long?
Uh-huh. Any period of time. I mean, I'm just reading her question. I mean, obviously, did you ever move elsewhere or spend,
Oh no,
any length of time?
no, no, I didn't move, but I've taken trips that were like three weeks long, or sometimes one of them was about almost a month long. And but no, I never moved out. I always stayed at home, and took care of things, and there was always something to do around the house. And my dad kept me busy, so I would stay at home, Amesburyite.
Bob, you've created a collection of photographs, and you've helped the Carriage Museum researchers and volunteers by sharing your photos of the Amesbury Mill Yard and other industrial places. What makes these places interesting to you?
Well, mostly the architecture. There's almost the style of the bricks, especially the factory buildings and everything. If there was a program for a masonry program like they have at Woody Votech, I would have been a mason instead of a painter. Because I like to have gotten into different styles of putting brick down. In fact, I've done a lot of brickwork around my house. That's what got me into it.
So, can you explain to us? We're seeing a photograph right now of the Mill Yard renovation. So, why did you take this photo?
Well, I knew it was going to be changed because that was going to be made over, and the Watkins had, I guess they sold it to the town, or I don't know how they got it. The town got it, but they were going to develop that area. So he says, I better take some pictures of it because someday somebody will want to know what it looked like, just before they started developing everything. Did that with Newburyport too, and in Haverhill, I did it too because they were taking down everything down on Water Street, and when I was going to school there in Haverhill Trade. So I know the old library building. I spent a lot of time at the Haverhill Library, and the archives there. You could just walk in and pick out anything, and now you've got to have somebody to let you in and certain times and everything else. But that was a beautiful building, that library building, because that was all demolished. They pretty much demolished every building. The Tucket Club, I actually worked there. And, one of the doctors' beautiful home, the old Haverhill City Hall. Well, that was falling down anyways, but a lot of them were very interesting.
So we have another question on Facebook from Larry Pearl. And Larry says, Bob, remind me about the woodworking machinery that your dad owned. As I recall, there were some interesting stories.
Oh. Well, the only woodworking machine that my dad bought new was made in Amesbury. that was from the Petgill manufacturing company, and they made woodworking machinery. And this was a tongue and groove machine. You could make screen doors and panels. And it was very interesting. And that was made in '83.
So did he make the machines that he needed? So is that also something that he did in addition to using them to build?
No. Most of the machines that he got secondhand, I guess this must have been during the Depression and probably even before that. Because some of the machines he got was almost 100 years old when he got them. And he set up the mill. And I know the mill was a lot smaller, when I was a kid, because I can see where the partitions were knocked down. And as he got more machinery, he would just add on to the mill. But they're large industrial machines. Sometimes it would take two of us to operate them. Especially the planer was a 3-sided planer, and that would take a board about 30 inches wide and plane it down.
Wow.
But it was slow. I think it was like 100 feet a minute or something. It was old. It's all flat belt driven. We had every time it'd wear out an automobile, and the engine was still good, he'd pull the engine out of it and make a cradle for the engine and run the shop with it until that engine died. And I remember the 1937 Plymouth. I remember riding in that car over the Rocks Village Bridge. You could hear all the planks clanking away. and plus the body rotted out, so he took the engine. The engine was still good. And we used that until he stopped using the mill in the 1972, 73. That's when we stopped using it. And the car.
That's amazing. That's like 40 years for that engine, if I'm doing some quick math there, right? Or more, right?
And of course, it sat there unused after that for 35 years until I finally sold it to a guy up in Maine. And I told him, I said, this hasn't run for 35 years. I don't know if it'll even run. The last couple of years, the air cleaner was gone, so they were sucking in all the sawdust and everything and running with that. They never threw nothing away. They always, and a funny story, I don't know how true this is, but my dad said they wanted this engine and they were going to exchange it for a duck. This must have been during the Depression, when they just didn't use money. You needed something, you just bartered back and forth with it. Well,
how many machines do you think are in, or, that are in the shop or have been created and used over the years?
Well, we had 10 of them that I sold. And there's 2 of them left. There's one edger that takes one side of a raw board, that had the bark on it, and that has a platform like it runs on tracks, and that tracks on a bench that's 40 foot long. So that's, you can take a 20-foot board and cut it down on that machine. That is the only one that's left. That would be the hardest one to get out of there. But when I sold the machinery, this guy from Plainville, New Hampshire bought it all. It took us 2 weeks to dismantle everything. And it's got 10 machines. It had the planer, it had the joiner. That was 7 foot long, that joiner alone. That must have weighed at least 1.5 tons. Plus the table saw, that was over 100 years old because there was a date on it. And then we had a big lathe. It was a machinist lathe, but we changed it over to a woodworking lathe. And that would take a 7-foot log in there if you wanted to turn it down. And then we had a bandsaw. That was a 36-inch bandsaw. Two papers. One was from the Laconia Car Works there in Laconia, New Hampshire. They built trolley cars with that machine. So that was in I still have one shaper that's run by electricity, so I'm keeping that one because I still use it. I can make molding and everything.
I love that you're still using at least a couple of the machines. Larry Pearl is asking another question on Facebook, and he's saying, what happened to Petgill? I don't know what that means, but he must think that you do, Bob. So what happened to Petgill?
Well, they made machinery in Amesbury here, and on Elm Street, that was the Petgill factory there. It's right on the corner of Elm Street and Clark Street. That was the factory there. And I think they had another factory someplace else in Amesbury. I'm not sure exactly where. But I found out that that was their factory originally. And some of their machinery is in the Henry Ford Museum in Michigan. Michigan. I was surprised to see it there. It says, "Yep, made in Amesbury," right in the casting. But they didn't have the machine my dad had. My dad had a different machine. So I told the guy that bought that machine, I said, that's a historic machine, so take good care of it. And some of the Petgill family found out that I was having that for sale, and they came down and took pictures of it. And they wanted to know where it was going to go. So I told them, always try to keep track of it. Anyways, hopefully he'll set up that mill. I check him out every couple of years and see if he's going to set up his mill, have all that machinery working. I hope in my lifetime they'll be working again. I miss the
That would be just. Bob, you've created an amazing record of Amesbury with your photographs and your paintings and your scrapbooks and your collection of historical things. What would you say to some of our younger viewers about getting started in making a record of Amesbury?
Well, this would interest you, and take pictures, and even if it's a modern building, it won't be modern in 40 years from now, and make sure you put the date on it and put a little caption. I caption all my pictures. I usually have them made up with borders so that I can write the caption right on the face of them. But that's not always possible. When I first started taking pictures, they didn't have borders. And I just wrote everything down in a 3-ring binder and, just put the number on the picture. I have to look it up by number. But I think I've got over 50,000 photographs now. Last count anyways.
So they're organized in a binder. That's how you keep track of everything?
Well, I started with binders and I ran out of room. So I had a big drawer and I put them in boxes, small boxes they used to come in, and fit about 3 or 4 rolls in a box. And I've got running out of space that way. And I've saved, I used to belong to the Salisbury Point Railroad Historical Society, and they had a lot of these index files. So I've been putting them in that, and they just fit just about right in there. So I'm running out of room though. So see, you can see on the picture here the captions on the bottom and the dates. That was the first picture right there. Just looking at the same one that I'm looking at, that black and white picture.
I love how you just organically knew that you need to date it, you need to write it down, you need to put information on the photograph so that in the years to come, if somebody comes across it or sees it, they know so much information about it. I love how you've done that.
And if I find a little history about it, I'll put it on the back of it. So it's always on with one picture. Everything is there. You don't have to go looking at different places for the information on it.
Why do you think, Bob, that taking an interest about things that are around us is so important?
Well, something that you don't think that's very important now might be to somebody in the future. You know, it's probably doing some research and they're looking at a certain building, and maybe they bought a certain building and there's no history on it because it was too modern then and nobody bothered to take a picture of it or write anything about it. I know the Bartlett Museum, at one time, was going to have a program of everybody taking pictures of the whole town. I don't know what happened to that program, but I guess nobody was interested in doing it. So I've taken most of the Highlands, you know, Hillside Avenue, some of the houses I know my dad built. I take a picture of them. In fact, I still got some of the blueprints, some of the buildings in town that he built. I know he built the recreation hall at Camp Fellsland, which is now Tewksbury Pond camping area there, that big building there. He built that. He used to take me around different places when I was really young, you know, when he was figuring jobs. So I saw a lot of Amesbury that way.
Do you
was gonna,
have any idea how many structures that your dad built?
Well, I know of, let's see, a large house and another house, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, about 7 of them I know in Amesbury. But he owned land after he come home from the war, because he developed he bought these rentals down to Hampton Beach, and they were just shacks. They were just summer rentals, and he would demolish one of them at a time and totally rebuild a new one there. And so there's 4 of them down there, and then up in Northampton, North Shore Road, I know of 4 buildings he built there. And the last one I helped him build when I was graduating from trade school. See, when he would do a job, and because he worked for the union, and you had to work union jobs, and when you got laid off, then you had time on your hands, so he would start another house. And it might be 4 years before that house was finished. I mean, the birds moved into the North Shore house before anybody moved in there. I said, geez, lad, we can't finish this off because the birds got a nest up there on the rafters, and they'll have to wait till they have their fledglings, you know.
That's great. I'd love to invite John Mayer, the executive director of the Carriage Museum, into the conversation. Bob and I have been having a really good time, John, and I'm sure that you want to make some comments, questions, etc. before we wrap up our show.
Yeah, thank you, Meryl. I really appreciate Bob. He's been just a steady and patient supporter for us. I think the first time I spoke with Bob, we were curious about the history of water power and even hydroelectricity in Amesbury. So I mentioned that to Bob, and turns out he had a photograph, and this was right adjacent to where the Ideal Laundry was, that showed the hydro station that had been right next to Lake Gardner Dam. And I was just completely blown away by that. And, Bob loaned it to us while we were doing our research. And then he followed up with a photograph of some of the dam structure. I think it's called the Joppa Dam, Bob, is that?
Yes, yeah, that was the original dam that was on the Powell River before that lake was formed. And that, I think some of the timbers, if there's very low water, you can see some of the timbers of it. I think it was a crib dam, like the one that's down near French Street parking lot.
Well, and so those were just a couple of examples of how Bob's collection and his interest in this local history really inspired a group of volunteers who were very new to the subject. Bob's painting and photograph of the Newton Road pumping station, we were also interested in that building. And it was fun to hear Bob talking about, as a young man, your father took you into that building?
Yes, and it was run by steam power. They're pumping water by steam. And I must have been maybe 3 or 4 years old. I know I was not in school yet.
And didn't you say you also measured the building?
Yes, I took some measurements of it. I couldn't measure everything because I can't climb up on the roof or anything, but
yeah.
And I made a scale drawing of it. And I still have the scale drawing, and I'm thinking of, well, maybe my next lifetime I'll build a model of that. I'm kidding. Kind of, you start getting arthritis, then that's the end of your fine work that you can do.
Well, I think the other part of, the interactions I've had with Bob is, we'll be going through a old industrial building, and Bob will be there with his camera following us along, looking at different parts of it and helping us get a better understanding of the buildings themselves. So it's a pretty remarkable person with this amount of enthusiasm, this passion for the things around him. Hearing the stories about a mill that his father operated behind the house. It's just a pretty amazing experience that, Bob shares, and that material, is, we're learning from that just from Bob and the way he's shared it with us.
It's just remarkable. And, I did get to see a small portion of what you have, created going into the Carriage Museum offices, and just, really amazing. I hope that Bonnie was just back on Facebook, and, she actually wanted to ask John if we're going to be, scanning any of Bob's photos to archive, because they're amazing.
Right. Good. I mean, that's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think that's an opportunity. And, I think the Carriage Museum wants to be a catalyst for creating a public record of this kind of material, whether it's things that are here at the Carriage Museum or at the public library or perhaps at the Bartlett. I think it'd be a great thing to collaborate to create this community collection of history. I also know, just from the things that Bob has shared as we were preparing to do this program, that there's so much more that he has to offer. As we work to build the Industrial History Center, that's going to be a venue for that sort of material to be available for people to see, to offer programming, to even offer classes or workshops on how to do model making. Or already I think Bonnie's been part of this Aperture on Amesbury program, where we bring people into different spaces and they make photographs. Now we've organized an exhibit that's online. So more and more, that is the kind of activity that we think is going to really cultivate more interest in Amesbury history.
So before we wrap up, anything, John or Bob, that you would, like to share with our audience? Anything we missed?
Well, the hydro plant that John was talking to you about, I was there when they dismantled it. The electric company took the generating equipment out of it, and they brought it down to Nichols Junkyard and smashed it up.
Wow.
Because they did not want any competition of anybody running that to generate electricity anymore. So I wish I had a camera then, but I did not. I was still in grammar school, I think, when that happened.
Wow.
That was a shame that was, because that was in perfect condition. And I took pictures of it when there was all this being dismantled, and when they rebuilt the dam, I took pictures of that. And when they rebuilt just about all the bridges in Amesbury, I have pictures of them. The Chain Bridge, and, the Deer Island Bridge there, and that bridge, for the Chain Bridge, was replaced like 3 times. I remember when it burned. Yesterday, it was called the Essex Merrimack Bridge, and that was burnt, and it was abandoned there for a long time before they rebuilt it. And then that bridge, when they rebuilt it, was taken down, and the current one was built, on the same site. So, but of course, history, it was all around me. Right across the street from my house was the weigh station for the Babine Ice Company. They used to weigh the ice right in front of my driveway there, right across the street. And they stored the ice in the back there. And that barn that was there was taken over after the ice company with the B&B Oil Company. And one winter, when they plowed the snow, they stacked it up against the wall, and the wall collapsed, and the whole building collapsed. And, so they lost 2 oil trucks, and one of the owner's car was under there. It was all flat.
Wow. Bob, I think these stories are great, and we will continue to be in conversation with you. COVID's totally affected the way we do our programming, because this sort of program we would have done live and had an opportunity for more people to interact and talk to you about these experiences. And I look forward to doing that again. I think that it's going to be a fabulous thing to just build, enthusiasm for these kinds of stories that people remember about Amesbury. I think it's remarkable, what you have to share. Also, Bob, want to thank you. You do not have a computer, and here you have come into our office, and we've set you up in front of a computer. I know you're celebrating the fact that you don't have to do this all the time, and it's maybe a good reminder for all of us who are on Zoom all the time that, there's another way of living that is free of these kind of devices. But Bob, you've been really patient and very gracious, and I totally enjoy listening to your stories about Amesbury. So thank you so much for coming and being part of this.
Thank you for having me. That's an experience for me.
Bob, thank you so much for, in joining us today and sharing your very personal insights into the way that you remember Amesbury. Bob, a great friend to the Carriage Museum and a lover of Amesbury stories. For our audience, we hope that this was fun and interesting, and that you were intrigued and inspired, and that perhaps you will develop your own family stories. Please let us know. Soon, the Amesbury Carriage Museum will open a new venue, the Industrial History Center in the Amesbury Mill Yard. And also soon, we look forward to gathering together with you to share more family stories. Thank you.